James Melendez, James All About Business. Thank you for joining me today. This subject is about the need for engaging a chief of staff or a chief revenue officer and leadership team. Please stay tuned to see my perspectives on this role for this leadership organization. So this video topic is definitely supporting a chief of staff for a CRO organization. So this organization can have up to 25 to 35% of the entire headcount. So that's why I'm starting here. But I'm also advocating for other C-suite leaders to have a chief of staff. And that's, of course, dependent on ARR or annual revenue. How many COSs for an organization? Well, you see, I'm advocating for a minimum of 2. And generally, that's going to be obviously for the CEO and definitely for the CRO. That's starting off at least an organization with 200 to 300 million in revenue ARR. The solid line obviously depicts that the CEO is more often than not going to have a COS. The dotted line is truly an opportunity to engage with a COS for the CRO organization. Tenure is decreasing. In 2020, the tenure was 4 to 5 years. Today in 2023, just 3 years later, it is between 1.5 and 1.9 years. So there are reasons for that. Now, there is a very fast decline, and the number one reason is unrealistic sales targets. But we can also look at CROs, and they agreed to these sales targets, and for several reasons. One, they think that they could definitely get there. Two, is that they can actually build to that structure to eventually catch up and get to maybe the next year's sales targets. Now, the second reason is CROs are in demand by other SaaS organizations. So they're lured away quite easily, and that's because there's significant opportunity out there and great demand. Number 3, lack of team effectiveness and poor engagement. So I have a story in a CRO organization where I worked. A CRO didn't have the support of a COS, so this CRO was really not in touch and really having the scope of understanding what the rigors are of the daily work life of the management team, as well as the individual contributor team. She might be aware in terms of her direct reports, but ultimately there was such dissatisfaction. She said that she promised and held herself accountable to make a change, and unfortunately those changes never occurred. So the chief of staff here can support in terms of training, say, part-time chief of staffs. Individual contributor might want to go down the path of having a career as a chief of staff. And in order to get there, it's really hard to get there without experience. So I've seen this before and experienced this in another organization where there were part-time chief of staffs. And they were very, very effective. They enjoyed that role. They have the role that they were hired in to do. In addition to that is the part-time chief of staff work. That additional support can definitely help all these teams here. A person who wants to do this role, this stretch assignment or this development goal, that they could actually really get that experience. So if this is declining in just 3 years, what will it be like in the next 3 years? My question is, will it actually get to 1 year? The organization never understood what the impact of that CRO was. And that's unfortunate because the next CRO will have their own agenda and way of doing things. And by the way, it's disruptive. So a CRO is not going to go in there and not make changes. And it's really incumbent on that CEO to understand that particular role of a CRO and to support that person. And I think there's an opportunity for that, especially with the aid and help of a chief of staff to help that CRO to become as strategic as possible. The word cloud, like the COS word cloud, highlights chief focus areas of a CRO and leadership team. Again, these words, traits, qualities, and phrases certainly speak to a CRO organization and help to hone in on what a CRO organization looks like. And of course, each CRO organization will vary, but I think these are some good anchor points to look at. You can stop the video to look at these as well. Now, here's a rationale for a CRO to retain a chief of staff. Now, chief of staff is beyond a force multiplier. So right here, I talked about this as creating a comprehensive resource to a leader and team with a focus area on core team priorities, needs, and engaging opportunities. It's pivotal in creating this framework and platform for both cultural and organizational development for creating a high-performance organization. I just chose 4 specific points here. That is, approaches, innovations, and solutions. So a COS is essential in facilitating 360 approaches, innovations, and that is one person who can go out there into the organization and to really delve into the organization and to make some meaningful approaches that are requested, that are envisioned by the leader and leadership team. CRO's percentage headcount is pretty large, probably the largest organization, and it's very expensive to operate, first of all. Secondly, a chief of staff can definitely partner, support and help the leader and leadership team to meet its objectives and to help the CRO community to be successful in their roles and to be highly engaged. Also, this is a ability for this particular role to help the agility and strategic qualities of a leader and leadership team. And so it's to really help them to take away some of those tactical touches that they do today. And lastly, efficiency. When I talk about efficiency, I think this is one area that's super important because this is an organization that takes a lot of resources. So over time, the CRO and leadership team should be working towards a greater efficient organization. So a $500 million CRO organization, say 400 or 500 people, should not become a 1,000 person organization for 1 billion, showing efficiency and really scaling to that number. And I really believe that's a core responsibility of the CRO and the CRO leadership team. I created this sample CRO organization. Now, generally, you would see this in a $300 to $400 million organization. The reason is simple, that there's a belief that you have to get ready to have that platform to go to market and making sure that you can accumulate those sales, that you can get in the marketplace and truly stand for the brand in making sure there is market penetration being completed by the organization's sales professionals. So this is sales-led growth versus product-led growth. So PLG is something where I think in some organizations it's believed to be maximized. So sales-led growth is something where the belief is that you can actually garner more sales and perhaps get into organizations that you have to really craft deals. Now you see here there's a chief of staff or the CEO. Perfectly, find that to be a great setup. But I also think that the CRO obviously is needing that support here. Organization setups, they're very much similar to this. Are they exactly the same? No. Every organization is going to be different. I do question the relationship of having this reporting structure of CRO to COO. I'm not sure that's beneficial to the CEO and to the CRO organization. I would just actually make this a direct report and making sure that communication is very, very solid between CEO and CRO. You can see how the COS can be pivotal in making sure, these are sales leaders here. You have a channel organization, RevOps, customer experience, RevStrat, sales engineering, sales enablement, customer success, and deal desk. And some organizations, the marketing function rolls up to the CRO. In this particular example, I have not included that. So you can see all these other positions and focus areas. These are not just one job, they're many jobs. And hence you can get to 400 to 500 professionals pretty quickly. And so the organization is pretty complex. Software as a service is a complex sales motion and definitely needs this coordination. So as you saw on the previous slide with the word cloud, there are many functions and features. And this is something that the CRO can touch a lot of things, but cannot touch everything, and definitely needs this particular role here, chief of staff, to help her or him to execute to the role as the organization needs. So it needs obviously efficiency, coordination, being strategic and less tactical, and making sure that it's a high performance organization as well. So there's a lot of things this chief of staff can do. Here is a CRO organization challenges and opportunities spectrum. I think this is a really important piece of work that I do, especially when I'm with a leader and leadership team, and I tend to workshop this. So this is something that I think visualizing this helps a CRO and LT to understand the state of that organization. And this is something to identify priorities and even relate categories and challenges to each other. To have a high performance organization is not by accident, it is something you do by intent. Let's take a look at this a little bit closer. The leadership team, in terms of the workshop, might pull these down and say, these are things we need to work on, or these things really resonate with each member of that organization. So in this particular example, I'm going to focus in on decision management. So one of the things that's close to this is wrong decision makers. Common and frequent complaint area for an organization, especially for the individual contributors or executors of a decision. That could be many people. So categorize, place things together, and being able to come up with an approach that perhaps you can solve more than one problem at a time. As I mentioned earlier, decision management, say this particular leadership team said, oh, we really need to work on this because it's a big pain point for the organization. And so this is something where in this spectrum, for example, an organization might point out that maybe they're in the left quadrant here. So they're in the poor decision to better decisions, but poor communication might be one example. But they really want to create a culture, a decision management culture that is good decisions and good communication. Decision incoherence can be a problem in some organizations. The decision makers have the most knowledge because they were involved in the decision. Now, managers have a little less, executors have much less knowledge, and individual contributors have the least knowledge. This does happen consistently and often in organizations. So the consequence, say for decision execution, is not knowing full parameters. What is the decision scope? What is out of decision scope? Is this decision a pilot? Is it about a market segment or just one market segment? And so also, what about the regions? What does this support? I had a sales leader who came to me and says the decision had been made. And I said, okay, that's great. Let me look at the source data. He says, oh, you don't need to look at that. Here's the decision. But I went to the source data to find out what that decision really was. It was a pilot. So I did mention that previously. And I wanted to know, was this in force for the ongoing term? Was it good for all regions? That is EMEA, APAC, and AMER. Was this for all market segments? And as it turns out, it wasn't for all market segments. It was actually a pre-created list of strategic accounts. And that particular list was important to know about because if I had started executing to that sales leader's request, I would have been working on perhaps every single market situation, every deal where perhaps there wasn't this particular decision that was made that would be affecting all accounts, all deals. I would have had to correct that, and that would have wasted a lot of time. I had to look and spend quite a bit of time asking a lot of people where this documentation might exist. It wasn't free flowing, it wasn't transparent, it wasn't readily available. And so I think this is an opportunity for an organization. While I might experience this, other people do too. And I think this is one example where organizations really need to do a better job in this area. So here's the decision platform. Here's the culture that's created by executing to each of these items here. So you're going to see that there's a proposal standardization. And maybe that proposal, perhaps not everybody's going to write up a PowerPoint and present that way, but perhaps there could be written documentation, especially for important decisions. Also, appropriate decision makers. The appropriate decision makers are essential, and sometimes that's not very clear. And so sometimes you might be looking at this and saying, well, why is so-and-so involved in this when they really don't have scope of responsibility or area of responsibility? And so that definitely does occur. Management approvals and endorsements. Now, when it's a larger decision and it's perhaps a PowerPoint and it's being presented, I have experienced where there are basically three types. It's agreed with no changes. Everything is endorsed, everything is accepted. Sometimes they're modified, or sometimes there's a request for some items to be modified and some of the points are approved. So if there are 4 points, 2 are approved and 2 need to be modified, or perhaps they are rejected entirely. And then there's also are rejected and not approved whatsoever. So people do come back later with a revised proposal for the management team or leadership team to look at and to review and endorse and approve. Now, decision management is once a decision is made, say you have these two categories here, so it's agreed with no changes or modified. So it's documented. Where does it live? Where can people access this? How's it communicated? If it's a big decision, shouldn't it be in a town hall and also be in the perhaps learning management system? It depends on how difficult that decision is in terms of what it means for process. Decision implementation. Who's a person to do that, or who's a team to do that? Who's a translator and adjudicator? So perhaps it's a person who wrote the proposal, but more likely it should be someone who's neutral, and that person would be, say, a chief of staff, for example. A decision culture is paramount. It's something that once it's really lived and becomes ingrained in the organization, it's no longer thought about. It's an organization where this is one part of the business that's easier to do than perhaps other parts of the business. Where we get with this is something great. We get decision coherence from the decision maker all the way to the individual contributor community. It is known. So this reduces ambiguity. This helps to build towards a high performance organization when all team members are aware. So decision maker, again, it doesn't have to be the LT, but it could definitely be a management team within the LT, managers, executors of decision, and individual contributors who may be working on a portion of what that decision entails. So this is a place where people feel very good about what they're executing to, and this is something they don't have to think about in terms of ambiguity. So I have 4 anchors in this chief of staff delivering value. And you could add more. So Venn diagrams can be very complex, and I think they do serve a purpose. So here I have decisions, action management, responsivity, and organizational fitness. Within these four anchors are sub-anchors, and I'll hone in just a little bit further so you can see that. I think these particular sub-anchors are really important because these are qualities that come about from exercising these anchors. So with organizational fitness, I'll talk about in another video, but organizational fitness is basically looking at how fit the organization is in terms of their current state. Also looking at maybe even how fit is that organization to make a change over time or to really respond to, say, competition. So a sense of agility, a sense of speed, a sense of accuracy, and there's many ways of looking at org fitness. So you have qualities that come about: efficiency, awareness, knowledge, improvement, discipline, connectedness, communication, etc. Now this creates a platform for continuous improvement. I thank you for watching today. Please let me know how I can help your organization out, and I'll see you back here for another video.